as co-founder of Doctors for Refugees, I was asked to speak about the Border Force Act and about what doctors see when they're looking after asylum seekers.
And what effect has the Border Force Act had on doctors?
It's had what they call a chilling effect. There are many doctors who are afraid now to speak out, afraid to follow their duty. We have a code of conduct. The Medical Board of Australia has that, so as part of our requirements for registration as doctors in Australia, that we speak out, advocate for our patients when we see things that are wrong. But now we have the Border Force Act that seems to trump that, and if a doctor does speak out, he can be thrown in jail for 2 years.
And how does it affect the Hippocratic Oath?
Well, it's in direct conflict with the Hippocratic Oath, because part of the Hippocratic Oath is that a doctor must do everything he can for the welfare of his patient or her patient, and the Border Force Act denies us that right, that duty that we have.
What sort of stories do you hear from doctors?
There's all sorts of stories. There are difficulties being able to treat people properly, having the right equipment in the detention centres, having the right antibiotics and other medicines on the detention centres, having a system in which, as the people arrive, they're brutalised and the medicines they have got are taken away from them before the doctors can see what medicines they are. Their prostheses are taken away from them. You know, if they've got an amputation, their artificial leg is taken away. Their glasses, their hearing aids are taken away from them and destroyed. And so people are robbed of the things that they need to be able to function fairly normally. And the doctors on the island have to start from scratch trying to work out what the problems are and what medicines they should have and what treatments they should have.
What's the worst case you've heard of?
Probably one of the worst is, as I mentioned, Hamid Kazai, where it seems that he got a cut foot, which is a fairly straightforward problem, and there may well have been some delays in him being able to see a doctor. The guards may not have let him see a doctor straight away. When he got to see the doctor didn't have the right basic antibiotics to be able to treat that infection. Infections in Papua New Guinea need to be treated with a couple of very simple antibiotics, things like chlorphenicol or gentamicin. These things were not on the island. And he got very sick very quickly. The doctor wanted him evacuated urgently as an emergency. It took over 24 hours to get that evacuation to happen. By that time he was desperately sick and subsequently died.
And we hear more about the offshore detention centres. What about the onshore detention centres?
The onshore detention centres have been, up until now, easier to keep an eye on, easier to get information about the treatment. And the onshore detention centres are supposed to be equipped with the right medicines and equipment that you would find in any accredited general practice in Australia. There are problems, but the offshore detention seems to be much worse.
Refugees are welcome here. Refugees are welcome here.
So, is there a problem with doctors speaking out?
I think there will be a problem with doctors speaking out because they will be afraid that they will end up in jail for 2 years if they speak out. And for some of them, that is going to be a very scary idea that they could be put in jail just for speaking out.
But some members have spoken out, yes?
Yes, I'm one of them. I'm one of the 40 that signed the letter to the minister saying we will speak out, go ahead and prosecute us now because we're not going to stop.
Now tell us, you work in Brisbane.
Yes.
And you work with children as well. What effects do you see with children who have been in detention?
Detention is incredibly demoralising. Children in detention often become depressed like adults, and the rate of depression in children in detention is more than 40 times higher than it is for children who are just in the community in Australia. and so they don't grow well, they can't learn well, and they start developing self-harming behaviours and even suicide, children's suicide.
Do you have trouble treating them?
It's very challenging and difficult to treat them. IHMS had taken the position that an asylum seeker had no rights to any treatment that was better than the most rural, isolated, deprived area of Australia. And so, as happened with one young boy, I tried to get him in to see a paediatrician because he was having dreadful night terrors. He was waking up screaming, reliving some of the trauma that he had gone through, seeing relatives being killed, running for his life with his family through mud, through bodies. And I wanted him to see a paediatrician and be able to get specialised psychological help, and it was denied. The IHMS person I spoke to said, no, he's not got any right to anything that you wouldn't get in the most rural, isolated part of Australia, and you can't get that sort of service in rural, isolated parts of Australia, so he can't have it.
How do they come to that conclusion?
That's a good question. I haven't been able to get a satisfactory answer. What they say publicly is that IHMS meets the standards of an accredited general practice in Australia in terms of the detention centres and the services that they make available to IHMS children and adults, but it's not true.
How have you been able to help refugees on Manus and Nauru?
Doctors for Refugees has been able to develop a panel of different specialist doctors who help us, and when we get information about someone who's seeking some help with their treatment, we're able to put that information to the right sorts of doctors. And for example, there was an 11-year-old boy some months ago who broke his arm, and we got to see the x-rays, and it was quite obvious that he needed a proper operation because the bones were overlapped and they were twisted. It was a really bad break. And Doctors for Refugees approached IHMS and approached the department trying to get the right treatment done, in a nice way, and they just refused and said no, he's getting all the treatment he's going to get. So in the end we went public with that, and eventually Minister Dutton sent up an orthopaedic surgeon and a team, and the boy got the right treatment. He got a proper operation and his arm's been fixed. That's the sort of thing Doctors for Refugees does.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.